Hello, class. In this video, we're going to talk about what's probably, I think, the most important lesson you're going to learn all year, which is planning and budgeting. Okay, so really quickly to kind of gloss over this first slide, everyone has regular and ongoing expenses, which we can call expected expenses. These are things like your gas for your car or gas for your household, electric. These are things that you expect to pay. But many unexpected expenses also occur with little to no warning. Generally, I like to think of these as medical expenses. If you have to go to the doctor unexpectedly, if you get into an accident and have to replace your car, something like that. In fact, we can start with a list. The blank rows at the bottom are for you to make your own additions. So I actually had to remove those to make this table a little bit bigger, but these are the kinds of things you would expect. Now, something like um, electric could I like to think of that one as like a partial expected, partial unexpected, because how much power you use in a house will be variable from month to month, but you do expect to pay it. But then here's your unexpected expenses. We can kind of gloss over this. Um, and then on this slide, I'm not going to read this out to you. I encourage you to pause the video and read it on your own. But this would be something for you to kind of peruse. This is kind of a quick note section because we're talking about just kind of going over the table. So this was a family, a hypothetical family. I actually took the text out of the problem because who they are doesn't really matter. This is a fake scenario. This was their expenses, and this is how often they pay it. So they pay rent $700 monthly, utilities 85 monthly, and so forth and so on. But groceries, you don't necessarily buy groceries monthly. Maybe you buy them weekly. Car payment might be monthly, might be bi-weekly kind of thing. Car insurance, it's all going to depend on the exact um, frequency of the company you're working with primarily. So the annual cost, what's the annual cost? Well, you're taking your expense at $700, you're multiplying by 12 because it's assumed $700 per month, and that gives you $8,400. Now, same thing with utilities, but say groceries is $195. Since it's weekly, it'd be times 52. So you just got to pay attention to how often you're paying it. This would be 10,140. That's probably a hard color to see. I apologize for that. And then one more, this would be 85. Since it's monthly, we're multiplying by 12. This is 1,140. Okay, I went ahead and I realized I made a miscalculation here. So I went and fixed that and I filled it on the total. Now, this actually is meant to be unknown. We're not supposed to know this information yet. This is the idea of someone sitting down and going, okay, what are all our expenses? These are our expenses. The other expenses is meant to be an unexpected expense. So we're actually going to talk about that on this one where we get other expenses that ended up being $330 monthly, $80 monthly. Now, let's go ahead and calculate that really quickly. We're going to multiply both those by 12 because they're monthly expenses. That's 3,960. Okay. And then 80 times 12 is 960. So we get a final budget of $35,200. Now, this is their annual expenses. So all the money they bring in, they better be bringing at least $35,200 or they got to cut some expenses. Now, for the planning purposes of the future, they want to sit down, okay, if we get our paychecks monthly, I mean, obviously rent would be easy to figure out. That'd be $700 monthly, and this would be $85 monthly because those are already on a monthly basis. This is 190 and so forth and so on. But what's our monthly grocery budget? So you take the 1,000 or 10,140 and divide it by 12, and you end up with 845. So $845 becomes your monthly grocery budget. And we can fill in some of these other ones. 95, because they're already monthly. 175, and then 330, and then they ended up with $80 in savings. So that would be $80 left over that they can put into savings, and then we'll take the 3640 divided by 12, and we end up with $303.33. Okay. And that gives us $2,933.33. So the idea here being, okay, this is what our annual costs end up looking like, but it's hard to plan out for an entire year. So what you would want to do is plan monthly and say, okay, we can spend $2,933.33 per month. So then what they did was they went through and looked at a problem, and then they actually kept careful track for a month. Now, rent is pretty stable unless your landlord hikes your rent. That's the actual expense that ended up being for the next month. That's what this is supposed to represent, the next month. This is what they ended up spending, $700, car payment, $190. That stuff generally gets set in stone. But I left out the details of, and there's no way for you to know these unless the problem gives them to you. So they ended up spending $84 on utilities. That's nice. They ended up spending $867 on groceries, which is about $22 more. Maybe they can make that up somewhere else. But then they end up using $360 for entertainment. That might have been going to the movies or going to see NASCAR event. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. And then their other expenses, they end up having an influx of $385. So notice right here, right here, and right here were where they added to their budget. And so they ended up spending a grand total of $3,066 this month. So about $100 some odd dollars more. And this is kind of how you'd walk through the monthly budget. Figure out the annual cost, then divide all that by 12. You find all the annual cost by multiplying by the frequency, 12 for monthly, 52 for weekly. If it was quarterly, go by 4. Remember all those words. Quarterly for, I know I have a garbage payment that's quarterly. So that would be an example of a quarterly payment. Semi-annually, that would be 2. Annually would be 1. Things like Hulu and the video service that I use to record these videos on, that charges me yearly. Monthly is 12. These are all terms we're going to want to recall from when we did compound interest. Weekly, there's 52 weeks in a year. And daily, we of course always just assume there's 365 days in a year, unless we're using bankers interest, but that doesn't apply in this situation. Thanks for watching.